and Phil Duffy, who is the BNIC Cognac Educator. They'll be taking us through the world of Frapin and showing us 5 of the house's products and a little bit of the backstory. We're going to start with Patrice. So without further ado, let me hand over to Patrice. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Cognac Frapin, it's still a family business today. And this family have a very long story because they arrived in this area in 1270. So before the cognac, a long time ago. It was a birthday last year, about 750. So it's a very long story, but it's also a very rich story. And I have many examples for you. The first one is the mother of François Rabelais. François Rabelais was a famous writer in France in 16th century. He wrote many well-known books, Gargantua, Pantagruel. His mother was Anne-Catherine Frapin. So François Rabelais is in the family tree of this family. Is the reason why on our label we put the feather, because it's a feather of the writer from François Rabelais. Before the feather, on our label, we have a cut of arm like this. And this cut of arm has a story also. It was Louis XIV, the Sun King in France, who gave this cut of arm to his apothecary, and his apothecary was a Frapin. And to finish, we have also in the middle of the vineyard a beautiful chateau, Chateau Fontpinault. It's also a cognac for the tasting after. And it was one of the ancestors, Henri, who finished to build the chateau in 1872. So very rich story, and I miss many, many examples. What is Cognac Frapin today? We have many characteristics in the cognac world. At first, all our range, and we will taste a part of the range today, come from our vineyard. We control everything till the rootstock to the bottling. We never buy outside. So we have one of the bigger vineyard in Cognac area, about 240 hectares. And the second characteristic, all the vineyard in one piece, one property, is in the heart of Grande Champagne. You know, if you know the map of Cognac area, here you have the Grande Champagne in the middle, and Grande Champagne is the first cru of Cognac area. The characteristic of the Grande Champagne is mostly the subsoil. Subsoil is a crumbly chalk. Crumbly chalk is very important for the water supply of the vine, and we know why this year with the hot summer there is no problem of water feeding about the vine because of the chalk level. The rootstock may be down at 10 or 12 meters to pump the water. So it's a big characteristic. So we have a vineyard with main variety is Uni Blanc, like everybody. Even if I planted Folignan 15 years ago, it's a new variety between Uni Blanc and Folle Blanche, but I have no cognac today in the market from Folignan, so it's mostly Uni Blanc. Like a Grand Cru in Bordeaux, we have to pay attention to the vineyard because the beginning of the story of Frapin is in the vineyard. Our characteristic and quality depends on the grape, so the vine growing. So we have many kinds of techniques. A part is a traditional way because we continue the old techniques if it's good, of course, but we have also the new technique from the new knowledge, because now we analyze the leaves, we analyze the soil to understand the feeding, you know, so it's a both between tradition and new knowledge. To finish about vine growing, we started in 91, so a long time ago when I arrived, the sustainable vine growing. So it's a long period for Frapin. We have a certification now to prove the philosophy and our different kinds of techniques to pay attention to the water, to the okay. We start in 91. Generally, at the end of September, probably different this year because I'm not a specialist of the climate, but there is probably something changed because when I was young, we started to picking grape in the middle of October. Now, in normal year, it's the end of September, and I'm afraid that this year it will be in the beginning of September. So we have to pick the grape, and we produce a wine, dry white wine. It's a very difficult vinification in general because we can't put anything and no sulfur. And you know, sulfur is against oxidation and bacteria everywhere in the world. It's impossible because sulfur is a volatile element. So we concentrate it during the distillation, and the result will be harmful. So we can't use sulfur. It's the reason why the characteristic of the grape juice before the alcoholic fermentation, it's a little bit acidity to keep the wine before the distillation. And for the same reason, we have to finish the distillation before the end of March, because we consider after the end of March, the temperature may be higher, and then the acidity is not enough to conserve the wine. So very difficult vinification. And also very specific vinification. We have many kinds of techniques, and the characteristic of Frapin to control all the process of the production, is it possible for us to take risks, to develop special techniques, to try to produce something different. So it's our characteristic different than the rest of the market, I think. Okay, so is it possible to start the tasting with the first quality? The first quality is the 1270 here. So 1270, you remember, is when the Frapin family arrived in Cognac area. And the name is 1270 and not VS because, you know, I consider when you are in the heart of Grande Champagne, when you distill with a lees, you need time to produce something good without aggressivity, etc. So it's the reason why I have no mention of VS on the label, because in reality, the quality in the bottle, it's not a real VS if I compare with the rest of the market. But it's the younger one in Frapin range. So it's how to discover what is the Frapin quality. It's still a Frapin, but it's not a real VS. One of my aim to produce cognac is to produce something very complex. What is something complex? Something complex is something rich. And if you have something with a lot of flavor, everybody can find some aroma with their own souvenir, you know? To have something complex, you need to have not too much something, and very often too much something is a wood. If you have something too woody, it may be good, perhaps, but not complex, because everybody can find the same flavor because it's a wood. So if you taste this 1270, so it's a younger one in the our range, it's not a VS, so there is a lot of complexity. It's very fruity. There is some sort of vanilla from the cask, because of course we age in a cask. We will see after the aging. So there is some flavor from the cask vanilla, but not a lot. But also, I think a lot of aroma. For me, there is something, the idea from the flower. You know, it was many weeks ago, it was a flowering of the vine, and it's quite similar. So a lot of flavor, no aggressivity. And then it's very rich. So I think, you know, is it possible to use neat, but it's also, it's not the cognac from Frapin for the mixology, but because is it possible to try something like that? But you know, now your world, it's like cooking. You need something very good to produce something exceptional. So I consider in our range, it's probably the good match between this quality and your job. Even if it's the same for the other, but more expensive, of course. So even if it's a younger one, as you know, no aggressivity, very long aftertaste, powerful, you know. So it's really how to discover Frapin through the younger one, but not a normal VS. Generally, it's impossible. We speak after, if you want, about how many years we age, but I consider we need quite double than normal to produce something like this, you know, because we need time really to produce something good. It's okay. I don't heard you. Okay.
You're muted,
Okay.
Hamish.
Okay. I heard. Okay for you? It's good enough?
Okay, yeah, question, Patrice.
Yes.
So the standard aging for a VS is 2 to 3 years, is that right?
Normally, by the law, it's 2 years.
2 years, yeah. So
You
what?
have enough, yeah.
So are we saying that 1270 is more like 4 years, or?
Yes, yeah. It's very difficult because it depends. You know what is a blending? Blending is to reproduce the same quality every time when you have a blend. To have a good blend, you need to have the knowledge, but you need to have the stock. More you have the stock, more you can reproduce. You know, it's like painting. More you have some green color, more you have some blue color, more you have some yellow color, more you reproduce the same green. So what is important for you? It's to have in your glass the same quality as before. So sometimes it's 4 years, sometimes it's 3 years, you know, it depends. But I consider it's not directly 2 years. I need more. After that, it's very difficult to answer because sometimes it's more, sometimes less. What is important for you? It's not what I say, it's in your glass.
Thank you.
So after picking grape, we make wine, and generally in the end of October or the beginning of November, because I want to have malolactic fermentation, we have to start the distillation. So you know the distillation, it's a double distillation in a pot still in copper from Charente, Cognac area, etc. You know that. Frapin, we have 2 big characteristics. The first one, we distill with a lees. Voilà. So we have 6 pastilles, 4 here and 2 in the side of the wall. We distill with the lees. So you know the lees is a sediment during the alcoholic fermentation. I'm keen on 2 kinds of lees. The lees from the yeast, so alcoholic fermentation, but also the lees from the pulp. So for Frapin, there is no settling before the alcoholic fermentation. It's a very specific way, but I need both lees from the grape, part of the grape. So we have a pneumatic press to have a control of the pressure, to have fine leaves from the pulp without piece of pips, piece of leaves, etc. And we distill that. I think when you are a Grande Champagne and distill and age a long time, we need to have a distillation with a leaf. Second big characteristic, in Cognac area, in the distillery, people have some automatic system with a computer. My computer are Rémi, Jérémy, Emilien, and the other, Jean-Paul. I mean, all the big decision is through the tasting. You know, Frapin, it's a real artisanal way every day. It's an example of the distillation, but every day is the same. And you know, distill with the lees, we are not alone, but good distillation is not easy. You know, we have to pay attention that we have no lees who burn in the pot still, so we have a special system to wash the pot still with hot water, and many 2 times per month, the people, my computer, Jérémy, etc., have to go in a pot still without fire, of course, to wash the fat acid around the pot still. You know, it's not easy to have a good distillation with a lees. But I think it's very, very, very important for us, not only distill with a lees, but it's a big, important element for us. The second distillation, the distillation tasting, is the VSOP. The VSOP, is the same philosophy as the first one, 1270. I think, it's my opinion, of course, I think it's not a normal VSOP if you compare with the rest of the market, because the same idea, I consider one of the key is the time. We need time to put water very slowly, to etc. So for me, it's not a normal VSOP. More you age Grande Champagne distilled with the lees, more you develop the complexity and the flavor. So of course here you find vanilla from the cask, but not only. You have more. It's a little bit spicy. Everybody has the idea because it's a very subjective and personal, but. You have some cinnamon, so orange. So it's more complex than the other because more aging. But the same idea, no aggressivity, very long aftertaste. So it's Frapin style, really. So about mixology, we speak very often about 1270, but it's also the same with VSOP because I think it's a good balance between many elements to make something very good. Very round. Many elements. You know what is interesting during the tasting? It's the evolution. For me, in a good cognac, there is a good cognac in this area, not only, but also a good cognac, of course. The good cognac is complexity for me, but also a part of emotion comes from the evolution during the tasting. I mean, the tasting now, it will be different in half an hour or 1 hour in a glass, because through the small oxidation in a glass, there is evolution in the tasting because there is not too much wood. I stop the aging before having too much wood. Okay, good. I let you sometimes. Okay.
At this point, does anyone else have any questions? Just pop them into the chat.
Is it possible to ask also at the end if you want?
Okay, we have one. How does Patrice reduce the 1270 to 40% in the time it takes to age?
To reduce the alcohol content?
Yeah, to 40%.
It's through the water. It's with the water evaporation, of course, but also adding distilled water.
Yeah. Okay, great.
So it's a good question.
Sorry, Patrice. With something like the 1270 that can be 2, 3, 4 years old, do you have to start adding water in steps immediately after distillation, or do you leave it to age and then?
Okay, so it's a very technical question. You know, to have many difference in my stock, I need to make the differentiation because all the grapes come from my vineyard. So it's a good question, but I have many possibilities. I use different possibilities. Some of the eau de vie, after the distillation, I put water directly, a small part. Some not, because the extraction of the wood is different if you have high level alcohol or less level alcohol. So everything is possible, but what is true is with 1270, I have not the same time to finish the cognac as Fontpinot. So generally, I put water at the beginning, but not only, but generally a part. You know, it's not a precise question, but everything is possible because the extraction is different. So after the distillation, the result, so we take a part of the second distillation, you know, the heart of the Bonne Chauffe, it's a separate distillation. It's a spirit about 72% alcohol, translucid like water. So we have to age in cask to transform in cognac. For Frapin, we have 3 levels of aging in cask. The first level is new cask. I consider that the casks are new during 5 years, is a Frapin consideration. And during this period, there is a lot of elements go from the wood to the cognac. Tannin, polyphenol, vanilla. Of course, the origin of the wood is very important. How do you make cask is very important, like in wine. Okay, second level of aging in cask is we call it red cask. Red cask is between 5 years to 15 years. And then there is a small quantity of element from the wood, but not the same as a new one, of course. And the third level is old cask, sometimes very, very old. And we age sometimes a very long time in this kind of cask. And then during the aging in old cask, there is nothing from the wood. All the aging is mostly through gas exchange. Gas exchange is evaporation, the angel share, sort of concentration, and also oxidation through the wood. But not really from the wood. It's from the cognac in the wood, but not directly from the wood. So it's the cask. Another characteristic of Frapin to age the cognac is I have many, many kinds of cellars in two big categories. The first one is humid cellar, downstairs. Generally, by the evaporation, we lose less than the other, and we lose more alcohol than water in proportion in humid cellar, like everybody in this area. And Frapin, it's a big specificity. We have a lot of dry cellar. A dry cellar is upstairs, just under the roof. And during summer, like this summer, and a part of spring, a part of autumn, we lose more than in humid cellar. So more evaporation, so more concentration. The first concentration of the Cognac Frapin is a distillation at the beginning, but also the evaporation during the angel share. So we lose more, and we lose differently because we lose more water than alcohol in proportion. So you understand easily, if I age the same eau de vie downstairs or upstairs, it will be different at the end. And it's very important to understand that, because for Frapin, I'm very happy to be in the heart of Grande Champagne because of the very good terroir, etc. for the quality. But I have a problem. I have no variability in the production because all the grape, even if I have two kinds of Grande Champagne in my vineyard, it's all the art of Grande Champagne. So no variability like my competitor, for example, from different vine grower, different crew, different, you know what I mean. So to make difference in my stock, to produce something different in my range, I use mostly different aging. It's very important. So if we start to taste cigar blend. So cigar blend, so I have at the beginning, the first good news is the name is cigar blend, but it's also good without cigar. The first good news. We renovate the packaging of this cigar blend. It's the same juice as before, but now we have a new label with XO mentioned on the label, and we have also a new box, carbon neutral, etc., etc. The color of the leaves of the cigar plant. Okay. The cigar blend, it's a XO, old one, and the characteristic of this blend is we age 1 year in new cask, so more tannin than Fontpinot, for example, and we age in humid cellar. So you remember in humid cellar we lose more alcohol than water in proportion. So the result of the quality of this cigar blend, of course, there is more aging. You remember Grande Champagne distilled with the lees with a long aging. We develop the characteristic of the flavor. It's more complex, etc. But the characteristic is a cognac a little bit more round through the aging in humid cellar, and with how do you say that? It's not strong, but sort of not the good name. It's not strong, but from more tannin from the aging is something stronger. So it's the reason why the name is cigar blend, because we consider, I'm not a specialist of the cigar, but I consider this kind of cognac, it's a good balance between not all the world of the cigar, but a part, you know, it's a good match between the both, even if I think it's the same with Fontpinot. But if you taste it, then you can find more dry fruit, more apricot another time. It's also a little bit spicy, but a very, very long aftertaste. Some rancio, you know, rancio charentais. And at the end, you can find also a sort of tobacco, you know, cigar box, and this kind of cognac. There is a lot of evolution during the tasting, really. Huh? I don't describe because I think you are a professional, and everybody, when it's complex, everybody have their own souvenir. You know, for you it's apricot, for me it's fix, for you, you know, but you can find a lot of things like this with the evolution. Ouais, ça c'est bon ça. And what is interesting, if it's possible for you, it's to compare with Fontpinot. Because Fontpinot, so the name Chateau Fontpinot, you know, because we have a chateau in the middle of the vineyard. And in Cognac area, it's not the same as Bordeaux. To put chateau on the label, you need to have a vineyard, etc., a cellar, but also a chateau. you need a real chateau. So there is not a lot of chateau, cognac chateau in Cognac area. And the Chateau Fontpinot is where we receive people in our vineyard. So it is interesting because it's quite the same age between cigar blend and Fontpinot. Depends the blend, but quite the same age. But the big difference between the both, for Fontpinot, it's only 6 months in new cask compared with cigar 1 year, so less tannin at the beginning. And Fontpinot, we age it in dry cellar. You remember, we lose more concentration, but also more water we evaporate compared with a dry cellar. So the result, it's not the same as cigar. It's not round as cigar blend. It's more straight like this, you know, very fine, elegant, fruity, but it's more, it's a word of dry white wine, but I like it. It's very straight like this, like a diamond, you know, comme ça. And it's very interesting to see that only between different aging in cask and cellars, the result is completely different. And it's a key for me. It's a big key for me. But then you can find a lot of flavor in Fontpinot. It's yes, sort of apricot, dry figs. Ah ouais, non, c'est candied fruit. No, it's a very rich, and the aftertaste is incredible. I speak about evolution. I don't know if it's possible for you, but if you taste Fontpinot, I hope you appreciate it. It's very rich, very long aftertaste, powerful. It's like a firework. Okay. After the tasting, you remember your idea, and you put empty your glass, and you wait 1 or 2 minutes. After this period, 1 minute, if you smell your empty glass, the flavor will be different than the cognac, than the flavor in a full glass. Why? Why? Because in an empty glass, there is more oxidation than in a full glass. So evolution, you remember, and then it's not apricot, figs, it's more tobacco, cigar box, etc. So it will be the same in a full glass in 1 hour or something like this, but it just, if it's possible for you, to prove you that, for me, a good cognac has the capacity of the evolution during the tasting to give emotion.
Can I add to that, that if you've got the patience, leaving your empty glass for about 2 or 3 days and then going and smelling it is really interesting, because something like Fontpinot, that'll stay in there for a week and it'll get better and better and it'll change and evolve and it'll be incredible.
But still something after 1 or 2 days. So, so just a few, before the last one, just a few words about, because very often the question about customer and is how old is the cognac? Very often. I think how old is the cognac? It's not the good question. The good question really is how do you age during this period of the aging? I mean, for Fontpinot, if I consider it's near 20 years old for the younger one, at first, is it possible to use 12? If I say, for example, this blend is about 20 for the younger one, but next time to produce the same, of course, I use a 12. It's not 20, but it's not a problem, because what is important is the result, of course. But the good answer is how do you age? The good question is how do you age? Why? Because, you know, I have no rules to age except tasting all the stock each 6 months. All the stock, it's not all the cask. We have a lot, so all the big row, you know. Well. And sometimes I decide to pump this row in the other cellar to try to have something different, more round, or because the capacity of the aging in the other cellar is different. Sometimes the result, it's not what I expect, but it's not a problem, because complexity is a lot of things like this to have the complexity. You know what I mean? So the cognac moves for Frapin. When I decide to move in the other cellar, then we put in a big vat, and then at this time, sometime I put distilled water. More you put slowly the distilled water, better is. Then sometimes I start blending before the end. I make aeration, and we pump in the other side. After this kind of aging, after the period, generally, the tasting, by the taste, is more than the real age. At the same period, to compare, if I age the same cognac in a big vat like this, without evaporation, without oxidation, without blending, without distilled water, without anything, after the same period, the taste of the cognac will be younger than the other. You know what I mean? What is important is not how long is the aging, is how do you age during this period. And another time, what is important for you, for your customer, for it's not what I say, I could say, of course, but it's the result in your glass. As a picture, we saw a picture, it's funny because it's the cellar where I finish the blend before going to the bottling. And what is interesting in this cellar, you know, Pierre Frapin, who created the company in the middle of 19th century, he won a gold medal in Exposition Universelle in Paris, and he met Gustave Eiffel. And 2 years after, Gustave Eiffel came in Segonzac here to build this cellar. If you look at the roof, it's a roof. It's the Eiffel Tower, not tower. It's the Eiffel roof in Cognac area. So it's this picture. It's very funny. Okay, my timing good. So. Just to finish about the tasting is the 15 years old. I created this quality, I think 3 years ago, something like this, 3 or 4 years ago. With the COVID, I don't remember all. So it's a new idea, it's a new blend to try to create a new flavor if you compare with the rest of the range. To have a new flavor, you remember all the grape come from my vineyard, huh? I want to develop a new idea through direct from the cask, cask French, etc., but also with more alcohol than normal in Frapin range. So the alcohol content is about 45.3, and through the blending, of course, the name is 15 years old, but 15 years old is the younger one. It's a blend of older also. So through a new blend, I try to create something, a new quality, still Frapin, but I want to explore a new category of flavor if you compare with cigar blend and Fontpinot. It's more if you it's more dry flower, freshly, and you know, it's and even if there is more alcohol, it's not aggressive. So it's maybe a good idea for your job because of the characteristic of the cognac. So there is no mention of XO on the label, but it's a XO. You know, for Frapin, everything is XO except 1270 and VSOP. So. It's more spicy, but you have also some dry fruit. It's still Frapin, different than the other, but still Frapin. It's we have a sort of style. Very long aftertaste, no aggressivity, never. It's interesting. And what is interesting also, it's one of the rare old cognac in our range that is a blend between dry and humid cellar. The other, generally, it's humid or dry. For this one is a both, because to create something different, I need to blend the both. So it's from the both. And I think it's one on the only one in our range. So my timing is a little bit good. Just to finish, Frapin, you know, in a cognac world, we are small if you compare with the other and the big brand, of course. But Frapin, we try to develop in quality niche market, and in this category, we are quite bigger than in the cognac market. And we are present in the first 70 market in the world with the same range. Chateau Fontpinot is the same in UK and China and everywhere. There is no segmentation, you know, with the different markets. And just to finish, what is important for me and for you, I hope, it's to have some pleasure when you taste something. And of course, I hope that you have some pleasure to taste Frapin today. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. So I think it's over to Phil at this point.
Thank you. I'll start with a brief apology. I am working off a very small laptop here, and I'm going to try and make drinks at some point around this area. If I go a bit quiet, do tell me. What I'd like to do is talk a little bit about my thoughts on mixing cognac, and then I'm going to show you some pretty simple ones that'll hopefully give you some ideas. I think for quite a long time, for years, if not decades, the default setting for almost all bartenders and quite a few brands, and definitely the BNIC themselves, has been, cognac cocktails. Let's make a twist on a sidecar, or just a sidecar, or I'm going to make an old-fashioned or a Harvard, or something that involves stirring some brown liquid while looking quite serious, frequently wearing braces. And the other one is a dessert drink, often creamy, some sort of Alexander or chocolate or tobacco quite often, well, occasionally comes in, despite being quite dangerous. These drinks can be excellent, but I think we're missing out quite a lot. Cognac, in my opinion, is the most mixable of all the spirit categories. That's quite a bold statement, I'm aware, but I reckon I can back it up. Firstly, with history. Secondly, with some science, or my interpretation of some science, which is not necessarily the same thing. Well before the sidecar was invented, way before the old-fashioned, before the word cocktail was invented, even before the creation of gin, cognac, or at least initially brandy, was being mixed in punch. Alongside rum, cognac was the dominant spirit in mixed drinks for decades. Rum eventually was spurred on by the tiki movement, which brought on a load of new flavors, a load of bold flavors to mix it with. But that didn't really happen with cognac. Cognac started getting mixed with fewer and fewer ingredients. We're glossing over the fact that there are some truly excellent tiki drinks with cognac in them, mainly created by Trader Vic. But by and large, the modern tiki movement has almost ignored cognac. That's a real shame, because cognac absolutely loves to be mixed. It can stand up to any flavors you throw at it. It loves tropical flavors. It loves robust flavors. It will just mix with almost anything. And there's a pretty obvious question there, which is why? What makes cognac mix so well? And Patrice has already touched on this with the idea of complexity. Complexity not just in tasting of loads of things, but complexity in there being a lot of different flavor compounds in there. Wood is an obvious one, but the various things that Patrice said, fig, apricot, orange, flowers. We can delve into the flowers that you can taste. Honeysuckle, tilia, iris. There's so many flavors. If we walk slightly into a bit of a murky realm of flavor pairing theory, which is certainly a theory that tends to work, though not necessarily proven. At its simplest, flavor pairing theory, as used by Heston Blumenthal and all his disciples, revolves around ingredients having shared flavor compounds, and so they work they work with each other. This gives you some fairly unlikely pairings in food and drink. I think he's paired jasmine flower with liver and so on and so forth. From a drinks perspective, it's slightly simpler. A very basic example of this is that gin tends to mix better than vodka. That's not a comment on which spirit is better. It's just that it tends to work that way. Gin has more flavors, so it plays better with other ingredients. If you ever want to try that out, I would highly recommend you take a gin cocktail of some sort. It can be anything, but it tends to work better with things with citrus. Excuse me, I'm getting an assistant here a minute. Say hello to everybody. Yeah? No? What are your opinions on mixing cognac? You're for it, good. Right. No, okay. You're more of a gin person. Gotcha. Sorry, my daughter's just come home from nursery. If you take a gin cocktail and make a version of it with gin and a version of it with vodka and give them to someone blind and ask them which they prefer, 9 times out of 10, they're not going to be able to tell you which is which. Also, 9 times out of 10, they will almost always prefer the gin one. And they won't be able to tell you why, but it's just that something happens when you mix with gin. Another example, coming at it from the other direction, is green tea. I'm amazed that green tea doesn't get used, or tea in general doesn't get used more as a mixer. There are so many flavor compounds in there that just match with everything. If you take some cold green tea and add it to any spirit, you've basically got a universal mixer. It will lengthen whatever you're drinking and make something delicious, provided the spirit you start with is delicious. So I'm being given some gravel here as well. I think my daughter has some soil from the Grande Champagne. Must have got it from my bedroom. So how does all this relate to cognac? Put very simply, cognac has more flavor compounds than many other spirits. There's been quite a lot of studies of this. I've actually got some of them here because I really am this boring. Using the techniques of gas chromatography and olfactometry, they're able to actually isolate the chemical compounds within distilled spirits and tell you what they smell of. I particularly like this one, partly because it tells me where what the chemicals are, partly because it tells me where they're thought to come from, mainly because it tells me when it doesn't know, it says unknown. But some of the flavors, when you look through them, are incredible. Geranium leaf, mushroom, banana, cut grass, kiwi. Kiwi I find to be an incredible flavor to find in anything, because kiwi's quite pungent. It doesn't really mix well with other things, but we can actually find it in freshly distilled cognac. I'll add that these flavors, and this runs for several pages, that's newly distilled cognac. And we already heard from Patrice, once you start aging cognac, magical things happen. We have the obvious thing of vanilla, cinnamon, clove, coconut, spice being added by the wood, but the slow oxidation starts to develop all these incredible flavors. If you take cognac from the Grande Champagne, from the center of the Grande Champagne, like Frapin, And if you distill it on the lees and get all of these incredible fatty acids in there, you've got oxidation and the most remarkable flavors happen. I'm going to show you a little screenshot just of this as well. One of my favorites, if I can get the screen to work. There we go. So this is one of my favorite things. This is very similar to a flavor wheel from the BNIC, but actually it splits the flavors into fruity, floral, woody, and spicy. It also tells you the ages you might expect to see them in here. And there are a few interesting points to me on this. Firstly, between the ages of 0 and 10, we start to see oak. I think intuitively, a lot of us think that old stuff will taste woodier, but actually that's not the case. In cognac, quite often before the age of 10, we see the spiciness and the woody notes reach a peak. And then it starts to evolve into more gentle types of wood, ultimately sandalwood, cedarwood. This one I find excellent. After you've aged the cognac 40 years old, you can expect to see some passion fruit notes in there. And if you look all down the fruity side there, there's a lot of fresh fruit. Between the ages of 20 and 40, we're getting orange, we're getting grape, we're getting lychee. And this, to me, is part of the uniqueness of cognac. It's part of the uniqueness of the terroir, because no other spirit does this as well. You can age a cognac for 50 years and it will still have flavors of fresh fruit in there. It can still taste fresh. Another one that I really like is down the bottom right there, curry. I will admit, I don't think I've ever tasted curry in a cognac, but the BNIC tell me it's there, so we're going to believe them. Just to show you something else, which will be, might look a little bit silly, but this is actually a graph from gas chromatography olfactometry, and they can actually identify the peaks on this graph as the various spirits. It's a wonderful mixture of technology and just cobbling it together. You see a photo of these machines, they cost about £1 million. Big machine, analyzing a spirit, and on the end of the machine, they plug in a hose with a funnel, and someone sits there with their nose in it and goes, rose, orange, and that's how they identify them. As a side note on this, that graph on the right is actually a number of cognacs, freshly distilled cognacs, laid one on top of the other. The graph on the left shows you when you zoom in to that very small bit, and we see that the differences between cognacs are these nanogram per litre differences in certain volatile components, which doesn't really tell you much about mixing cognac, but I found utterly fascinating. Right. Stop sharing. If you step back into the practical realm rather than esoteric graphs, you can actually try this in your own bar as well, similar to trying the gin versus vodka. Some of you who've been around long enough might have heard of the Cordon Bleu challenge, which was a game that a bunch of reprobate bartenders of the Match Group used to play back in the early 2000s. We went through a lot of Martel Cordon Bleu, usually in the hours between 2 and 5 a.m. And the challenge was basically you can take any drink, any cocktail, and substitute the base spirit with Cordon Bleu. And not only will you make a good drink, you will make something that is better than the original. This was clearly Michael Butt and Tim Stones being facetious. But we tried it, and we did it a lot. And then we found out that it's not Martel Cordon Bleu that's the magic. It's cognac. Cognac will mix with anything. And people have tried this as an experiment on some of the most ridiculous cocktails. You just think, right, I'm going to prove this wrong. But it works. Cognac will mix with almost anything. This links slightly tenuously back to something that myself and a few other people have been pushing for a while, notably Kevin Armstrong from Satan's Whiskies. And it's that cognac really should be mixed with loads of flavors. That triopoly of the sidecar, the old-fashioned, the creamy drink, it doesn't have to bind us. We should start looking at other things. Tropical flavors are a big example. The second point is that cognac really should be accessible to everyone. I'm a scally with a silly haircut who spends his summers carrying kegs of beer around muddy fields. Cognac is possibly my favorite thing in the world. If it's accessible to me, it should be accessible to absolutely everybody. And it's our job to make it accessible. If we're wearing braces in very serious bars and staring down brown drinks and keeping a serious expression, that's not really it. If we go into the 5-star hotel, we know that cognac's got a grip in the 5-star hotels. We know that the luxury market is taken care of. And we know that the hip hop market is taken care of. There are a lot of people. There's a huge demographic in between these parts that we don't really see interested in cognac. Occasionally in a bar, you'll see a token cognac cocktail on the list, usually languishing somewhere near the bottom. almost always going to be the cocktail that no one ever sells and that no bartender ever recommends. It's just there because. And this is a huge, huge shame when you consider the things we can do. Just before I crack on with doing a couple of serves, there's a couple more things I wanted to mention. Firstly, we're living through what I think of as a golden era of mixers. Some of the ones I'm going to use here, and I do apologize if this makes everything a bit weird. So I've got some mixers over here. I've got some mixers down there. This is more than we ever had when I was working in a bar. And I got these from my local supermarkets. And I do not live in a posh area. I live in a pretty horrible area. But I can go to my local supermarket and buy cucumber and mint and passion fruit and vanilla sparkling mixers. Artisan tonic brands, interesting soft drinks are everywhere these days. These are incredibly good for any form of quick highball. I could take cognac and mix it with any one of those mixers, and it's going to taste great. Another point, and I'll tread carefully here, the Aperol Spritz is a dominant drink at the moment in this country. Now, regardless of your opinions on the Aperol Spritz or otherwise, it's probably the most popular cocktail. It's also probably the only cocktail that's ever been available just in a normal pub. I think a lot of brands have tried to jump on that bandwagon, and most of the time they've failed. I have various opinions on that, but I won't share them here. What it does tell me, though, is that that style of drink, something that's light, something that's refreshing, something that's long, has a market, has people who will enjoy drinking that. With that in mind, the drinks I'm going to make for you, or the drinks I'm going to show you to make, very simple serves, hopefully pushing ideas in a slightly different direction. They're all deliberately long drinks. I'm making long drinks to get away from sidecars, Sazeracs, creamy drinks. The idea being that cognac is versatile. And that's, I think, what I would like you to take away from this. Cognac is versatile. Pretty much everything I'm going to make for you is, no, this is not true. About half of the things I'm going to make are creatable with ingredients from a standard supermarket. These are arguably pushed towards consumers. The other half are things that you can make in pretty much any bar. They require a little bit of technique, but certainly nothing beyond anybody. I think that's it. I'm just going to go to my freezer and get my glasses out because the freezer's on the other side of the kitchen and I'm not going to go backwards and forwards all the time. I'll be back in about 40 seconds.
Thank you, Phil.
Right. I'm going to try and do this down here. Hopefully it won't look too weird with me making drinks in front of my crotch, but we'll see what we can do. First one, we're going to start off by making something very similar to a spritz. This is actually one of Kev's drinks from Satan's Whiskers. And you'll have to excuse me, I think my daughter has stolen my jigger and I'm not going to go and find it now, so we're going to see if I've still got the ability to pour things by eye. Ah, there we go. So, we want 25 ml of Sauvignon Blanc. $25 ml of fresh grapefruit juice. And we're aiming for a fruitier cocktail here. So we're going to go with the 1270, which I think is the fruitiest of the ones we've tasted. I'm going to go with 35 ml of that. Top it up with lemonade. And pop the grapefruit on the top. And that is an absurdly simple drink to the point of being almost offensively so. But if you make it at home, or you encourage consumers to, it's delicious, it's refreshing, it jumps out the glass. And I think, I'll put that there for a sec. One of the things you'll hopefully notice with all these drinks is that they do taste of cognac. Similar to what I was saying about the vodka and gin, you can't necessarily identify the spirit as such, but it's very definitely a part of it. The flavors are marrying. The flavor that I'm trying to push through there is obviously grapefruit. Grapefruit doesn't jump out as being an obvious pairing with cognac, but honestly, it works fantastically. In a similar vein, this is one that Kev, again at Satan's Whiskers, came up with, specifically to challenge the Aperol Spritz, actually. He's done an experiment where he gives it to people blind and asks which they prefer. And so far, he's got almost 100% track record of people preferring this one. With this one, we use rosé wine. $12.70 again. I think 35 ml is a good measure for these ones. And this time, we're going to use a raspberry lemonade. This particular one I got from Asda. I've got a slight preference for the one from Fentimans. I think it's got the nicest flavour. And my daughter's just given me a spider in a jar as well. And there we go. Some raspberries. And again, that's a wonderful, refreshing drink. A lot of the drinks that I'm going to show you now center around this idea of summertime drinking as well. When we do manage to get out of the sidecar, old-fashioned Alexander mold, almost every cognac drink I ever see is full of autumnal or hibernal flavors, as if we should all be sitting in darkened rooms drinking these things. Whilst that might seem sensible because it's a brown spirit, I think counterintuitively, and this is going to sound really pretentious, cognac is bottled sunshine. There's 100 days of sunshine have gone into the grapes to ripen them. It then ages for 2, 4, 6, 10, 20, 15, 50 years. And at the end of that process, it has these fresh fruity flavors still in there. Granted, you're going to get more complex flavors along the lines of dried fruits, along the lines of spice, along the lines of wood. But you're always, always, always in a good cognac going to have fresh fruit. What I'd like to push people towards is looking towards fruity flavors, floral flavors, things that we associate with spring and summer, because that is actually when I probably drink more cognac. Okay. This one, a similar vein, but we're going a little bit more upmarket. So here I'm going to start off with Sauternes. I must admit, this was partly an excuse for me to open a bottle of Sauternes. 30 ml of that. $40 ml of VSOP, sorry, of 1270. And this time, we have a clementine tonic water. You can use any sweet wine you want to make this, really. Something like a late harvest Tokai would work well. I do like the flavour of things with botrytis in them, though, particularly if we're using something like clementine. I think botrytis wines do tend to have a sort of tangerine note to them, and that definitely works well here. Now, for garnish with this one, a sprig of rosemary. Seems a bit odd, but the waxy notes of the rosemary actually tie the whole thing together. And I really like the colour contrast between the sort of yellowy orange and the green. Okie dokie. Okay, this one, there was a very old match drink created by Michael Butt called a Big Appleberry, which was pretty simple, really. It was a dash of lemon juice, 60 ml of cognac, some squished up berries and some apple. It was very much a cocktail of the early 2000s. I've tried to recreate something similar, but with a bit more of a modern slant on it. For this one, we're going to use the VSOP. I think the extra spice works quite well here. And this is going to be quite a boozy one. We're going to go for a full 50 ml of the VSOP. I have a little bit of Poire William. Eau de vie is another thing that I don't think is used enough in cocktails. When you consider that what it really does is get the essence of the fruit. It's significantly more consistent than fresh fruit, and you do tend to get more intense flavor. What I would say though is that you should always pull the trigger quite carefully. So I go for 5 ml of that. That's a very good Poire William, by the way, that I wouldn't normally mix, but I didn't have any others in the house. And then Perry, 10 ml of Perry. Ideally quite a dry one. You can go as far as a medium dry. And then this is the Bramble Pressé, which this actually came out when I started in bars. So we're going back to about 2000 there. So it's a good 20 odd years old. And this is probably the most obvious of the pairings. I think pears and berries are clearly going to be friends with cognac. And to garnish that, I've made myself a little kebab of some fruit that I got from my garden. So you've got some wild strawberries, some brambles, and I cheated actually. My raspberries haven't fruited yet this year, so that's a raspberry from Lidl. Boom. For the next couple of drinks, it's a little bit more technical. Not massively, all very, very easy. Firstly, where's my glass gone? This was originally going to be a highball drink, and in fact, it was originally a highball drink, but it was so hot yesterday that I decided that I wanted a julep. So I changed this drink to a julep, and I had a really pleasant afternoon sitting in my hammock outside in the sweltering heat with some chilled cognac. The flavors here aren't exactly revolutionary as well. It's more a resurrection. If you've come across a Fish House Punch or a Georgia julep, peach is quite an old and common mixer here. What I've done though is make a peach and lemon verbena infusion. This was actually almost an accident. I bought some of those peaches a few months ago that always say ripen in fruit bowl on them. And of course, ripen in fruit bowl is a synonym for not ripe. They are quite good for cooking with though. So I poached a load of them based on a Nigel Slater recipe with some sprigs of lemon verbena. And I ended up with this beautiful dessert, but also a very light syrup, which my daughter drank most of, but I've then made it again. And it's just the most beautiful mixer. If you ever want to do it, get hold of about 12 small hard peaches, cover them in water, put in about 1 spoon of sugar for each peach, get about 20 leaves of lemon verbena, and simmer them for between 20 minutes and 40 minutes, depending on how hard the peaches are. What you'll get out the other end is not really a syrup because it's not sweet enough, but it has this beautiful peach and lemon verbena flavor to it. So, where's my measure gone? I'm going to use a full 50 ml of that. $50 ml of 1270. And then about twice the amount of green tea. This is a green tea made by a cold infusion. I don't really want any astringency in here. I'm trying not to add very much sugar. Sugar does bring out the flavors in cognac, but it can mask them as well. Another option, if ever you wanted to make this, would be to make a very, very strong green tea, reduce that and turn it into a syrup. Use a bit of that and top it with sparkling mineral water. I'm just going to get my list. And then we're going to take a nice sprig of lemon verbena. I'll lock the flowers off the end there. Pop that down the side. Lemon verbena is one of my favourite herbs. You don't see it about very often, which is a shame. The writer Mark Diacano called it like lemon, but better. You do have to be a bit careful with it because it does veer towards the sherbety, but if you cook it like I suggested with the peaches and then just use it as a garnish, you'll end up with this most incredible refreshing flavour. That's what I'm going to be drinking afterwards when I finish here and go and sit in my garden, possibly with a cigar. Okay, and I have one final drink for you. This one's going to be a straight highball. This is a pineapple shrub that I've made. I like to use apple cider vinegar with these things. I think it adds a depth to it. And actually, I am enough of a bell end that I make my own apple cider vinegar, which is thoroughly delicious and a great way of getting rid of leftover cider. I've done it a few different ways. There's a way of doing it where you put in some spice. You have to be very careful with the spice. I find 1 clove, a small blade of mace, maybe a slight showing of ginger. That tends to be enough. And then cook the pineapple with some brown sugar and then mix the result with some water and some vinegar. That's nice. What I'm after here is something a little cleaner though. So this is really, really easy. Chop up a pineapple, cover it with an equal weight of sugar, and top it up with vinegar and leave it for about 2 days. And that's it. Once you've strained it off, you've got this thing that is really quite delicious on its own or drank with tonic. But in this case, we're going to use it with the VSOP. So a healthy 30 ml of our shrub. $40 ml of VSOP. You might be wondering why VSOP and not 1270 on this one. There is a reason. 1270 I tend to use when I'm looking for things that are fruitier, but pineapple likes a bit of spice, and VSOP has definitely got the spice to it. So I tend to think it works better. And then you can top this up with soda, or I have a preference for sparkling mineral water for this. And this sounds ridiculous, but I prefer the texture of the bubbles. And lastly, again, pineapple likes spice. Pineapple also really likes sage. The trouble is, though, sage is a bit of a thug. If you start putting sage and stuff, it has a tendency to just make everything smell and taste like sage. It's also a bit of a thug in the garden, actually. It's currently trying to annex the thyme, as far as I can see. What I've also got, though, is a salvia flower. And if you haven't come across this, salvia is ornamental sage. It smells very similar, but I think these flowers are absolutely gorgeous. And I think flowers and drinks just look nice. The other recommendation I'd have for this one is if I had some slightly different glassware, for example, a very thin glass truncated highball, if you chilled all your ingredients, I would have that without ice. Or even mix all of the ingredients together with just water and carbonate it and put that into a glass. I think that would be pretty delicious as well. I'm fairly low tech in my house though, so I've made it over ice. I think most of us have got quite a lot of time for shrubs these days. The added complexity you get from either the fermentation or the vinegar is just fantastic. That's it. My aim, and I hope I've stepped some way in that direction, is to give you a few ideas to run with, to look at a few flavors that you might want to play with. The one thing I haven't done here that I wanted to, but I just couldn't find all the ingredients, was to do some more exploration with much more tropical flavors. Papaya, guava, passion fruit, all of these things work really well with cognac. And I would just love to see a lot more of it on menus, in people's houses, people drinking long, fruity, delicious, refreshing drinks. there's a sophistication that cognac brings that I don't think any other spirit has, and we should all drink more of it. Thank you all very much.
Great, thank you very much, Phil. Some fantastic ideas there. I think we've probably got a little time for a Q&A, so if anyone has any questions.
Yes, I have a question.
Yes, Daniel.
He was saying that they use distilled water to rehydrate the cognac. Why don't they use local water from springs and things like they do with whiskey up in Scotland?
Oh, you are true. It's a local water. It's a local water, but we have to use water without mineral element. So it's a local water because if you have too much mineral element and with the choke level here, we have a lot of calcium, and calcium maybe give a trouble in the cognac at the end. So we use local water, but I say distilled water because we have to put away the mineral, a part of the mineral element from the water.
There's okay, great. There's also a question in the chat from Alan Pomfret. He says, hi, I have a question for Patrice again. Your younger cognacs have a grassy vegetal note. Is this because of the lees distillation or where the cuts are taken or something else?
Vegetal?
Yes, a grassy vegetal note.
Okay, so it's a part of the aroma, the impression. Of course, it's very difficult to answer because the aroma comes from the terroir, the vine growing, the distillation. Okay, it's very difficult for me to answer where the aroma comes from. Really, you know, it's a very long chain production. And okay, but the quality comes from the terroir and all the technique, all the process.
Yeah.
Right. Patrice, following on from that one, would you consider in cognac terms that you cut the heart late or early or somewhere in between?
In a detail, one of the characteristics of Frapin, you know, a lot of people in cognac area use a very acid wine. They are really keen on acidity. I'm also keen on to keep the wine, but I consider if I want to find after distillation the aroma from the grape, I need to have a small maturation before picking grape. So generally distill wine not too acid, but the alcohol content is about 10.5% alcohol. You know what I mean? So of course, we have to adapt the distillation to this kind of wine, and it's not a normal distillation. So generally, we don't cut at 60, for example, because the alcohol content of the wine at the beginning is not the same as normal, as usual. So it depends. It's by the tasting, and sometimes is under 60. But it depends because it just when you know what is a distillation. It's we concentrate some flavor and aroma element, and then we cut when we consider the AV flavor arrives, for example. So it's not from the alcohol content, but from the tasting.
Great. Anyone else? Any other questions?
Sorry, I direct messaged Hamish about this rather than putting it in the chat earlier on. You've planted some Folignan about 15 years ago. Is that the only other grape you have, and how many hectares of it do you have?
So in the total of 240 hectares, I planted 3.3 hectares of Folignan. So another time, I'm sure that Folignan will be not a revolution compared with Uni Blanc, because if Uni Blanc represents 98% of all the variety in this area, there is only one reason, because it's the best. It's the best and more regular. So Folignan will be not a revolution, I'm sure, but it's quite interesting because the flavor it's a little bit different than Uni Blanc. So another time, it's a key for me to produce little bit different. So I have a sort of variability in my possibility in a few years.
And do you see it being used always as part of a blend or as some sort of special edition? Is it to increase your palate?
It's a good question. You have to wait.
Can you tell me where the best place to buy Frapin?
In your country?
Yes.
I have no answer about that. You have to. We work with Louis Latour distribution, so you have to ask them. Maybe Rebecca could answer for the place to buy.
Okay.
I'm sure we can organise that. Yeah.
I'm coming in a second. I'm trying to get my, oh, there we go. Hello. I can say that you can buy the cognacs directly from us at Louis agencies. Otherwise, we sell through Amethyst and Notria and Specialty Drinks and various other distributors. Oh, Master of Malt, of course, as well. Various other distributors. So it's quite widely available. So you can drop us a line if you're interested later. I'll disappear now. There we go.
Can we buy it direct from Frapin in France?
If you come to visit us, because you know it's very difficult for me, it's a very difficult exercise to speak about a very long job in a few minutes, in less than an hour. If you will be in holidays in France, it would be a good idea to visit us. We have a tour to visit the building, the cellar, etc. So is it possible to discover more? And then is it possible to buy here if you want? After the bit.
Thank you very much.
I have one question. Can you go into a little more detail as to the control that you have over every step of the process, what that enables you to do versus some of the big brands that buy from growers or use cooperatives?
I think more control. Our jobs, it's to adapt, because you understand that every year is different, the crop is different, the grape as the other vineyard. So every year, every year the problem are different. Too much sun, too much raining, okay? And during the aging, another time, there is more subjective idea than a real, so it's not a control. We have to adapt every time. I think a lot of people speak about artisanal way, but for Frapin is true. So, you know, I think more the good word is not control, it's to adapt at the situation. You know what, for the quality, for example, for the quality of Fontpinot, my aim is the quality of Fontpinot, and the way to go to this aim is not very important for me. What is important is the result. Is the reason why sometimes I make the blend at the end, but sometimes I start to make the blend before to go to this aim. So very often people need to have some rules. I have not a lot.
Right. Are you very involved in the vineyards?
Me? Of course, you know, my parents was vine grower in Cognac area, so you know, I fall down in a vineyard very young. And when I arrived in Frapin in '91, so 31 years ago, so even if I'm very young, but less and less. Huh? But when I arrived, it's to pay attention to the vine growing and vinification. And after it's I was a cellar master and technical general manager, but you know, so at the beginning it was a vineyard. I'm a professional from the wine and the vine.
Fantastic.
But
Thank you very
you know,
much.
another time, what is important, we are a small company, we are 30, and what is important also, I think, is the quality of the team. So I'm not alone. I'm not alone. I have a team around me, and I think the result is also due to the team.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Sorry, I've got one more question, Patrice, and I must apologize because I know this is quite an annoying one. Do you have any strong views on loose grained versus tight grained oak? Or do you prefer a mix, or do you, where do you sit? What's your wood policy?
I make many experimentation because it's the life of the cognac to try something else sometimes. But at the end, I come back every time to the wood of kind of limousine wood. So what is limousine wood? It's large pores because I need a lot of tannin because I age a long time. So if it's not from limousine, it's not a problem. If it's from Fontainebleau, for example, but I'm keen on the large pores of the wood. So not from Tronchet, Cher, Allier, etc., because it's too thin for me. And every time I come back to this idea. And also, how do we make cask? It's very important. We have an agreement with a cooper. We understand. So for Frapin, it's we burn. It's a middle burning plus, but a special middle burning plus for Frapin. So it's we need to have an agreement with a special cooper, not far from here. It's also very important, of course.
Fantastic.
And not too burning because I want to have the flavor from the fruit and not from the wood only.
Okay. Unless anyone else would like to jump in, I think we'll wrap it up here. So let me just extend my thanks to Patrice. It was wonderfully insightful. I think we've all learned a lot about Frapin today. And of course, from Phil, some great ideas for drinks, which we'll all be making later on, I'm sure. And thanks for coming, everybody. We'll see you in the next one. Thanks a lot.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.